they are to be recognized as a female, and they are to be given access to the women's locker room, girls' bathroom, girls' sports teams, etc. So many school districts that getting this edict from the Department of Education, which said if you don't do this, we aren't going to give you your federal education funds. They said, well, okay, we'll do this. However, the problem is, and they've also done it in Title VII. The Department of Labor has done it for employers. So several states and school districts filed a lawsuit. One was in Texas, one was in Nebraska. In the Texas lawsuit, the judge there said, put an injunction in place and said, no, Title IX is not to be interpreted the way this bureaucratic agency is interpreted. They don't have authority to make that determination. Congress makes that determination. So the court issued the injunction, and then as it progressed, the court came back and said, this injunction, I'm clarifying, this injunction is applied countrywide, nationwide. So it doesn't just apply to these people in my courtroom who brought this action, but nationwide. So at this point, the court has said, this does not apply until the end of this case or the new administration changes it, etc. So, but the problem that arises is there's two problems with using Title IX in this way. One major problem is it completely undermines the purposes of Title IX. Because the purposes of Title IX was to equalize the playing field for women and girls who historically had been given fewer opportunities to excel in sports, academics, etc. Well, if this redefinition of sex goes to include gender identity, and this has started to happen, you will have biological boys who said they identify as a female, will play on the sports teams, the women's basketball team, the women's track team, what have you. And this has happened. There was at least one case in Alaska where this happened. And the boy who said he identified as a girl played on the girls' track team and just blew away all of the competition. So the girls now will have to compete with biological boys to get on the sports teams, and it really just erases all of the protections that the women fought for. Say, we want to have girls' basketball teams that are on the same level as boys' basketball teams. If you have the boys on the girls' basketball team, that destroys that. The other problem is if you adopt the policy where you can have biological boys or men in the bathroom because identify as a female, and you're in various stages of undress and whatnot, then you're actually creating a discriminatory environment, because the way sex discrimination is defined under Title IX is it's not just the unequal treatment, but it's also creating what they call a hostile learning environment. So, and you've probably heard of hostile work environment cases that have come up in the news, like fire departments, things like that. But what this would do is this would create an environment. So if you have young women who are traumatized by having to be in a state of undress in front of a person who is a biological male, then that's a hostile learning environment for them, and that actually violates Title IX. So then they would have an action under Title IX against the school district because the school district created this environment. And it's not just, it's not just a, you got to get over a Critters thing. We have, unfortunately, thousands of young girls and boys who have been victims of sexual abuse of one kind or another. A lot of them never say anything about it, but they're walking in the halls of the schools, and they have this internal, that they're dealing with this trauma. And they can be triggered by the presence of these people unexpectedly. And it can cause real trauma that can affect their learning environment. So in reality, what they're doing is they're actually undermining Title IX and then telling schools to violate Title IX. Not to mention the fact that they don't have the authority to do that. So that's why it's important for bills like Delegate Marshall's bills, and the state of Virginia has in place that they maintain that sex discrimination is based on biological sex. And so it's important to continue to follow that as the platform does as well, because that in itself complies with Title IX, everything Title IX is meant to do. Thank you.
We're recognizing that your time is valuable, so we want to make sure that we keep the information short, brief. Again, at the end of the press conference, we will be opening individually to do questions. Our next speakers will be from a mom's perspective. We've been given some of the legal information from two individuals, and thank you both for being here. But Jeannie Lauder and Terry Beatley will now speak from the mother's perspective.
It's a humbling thing to come up in front of all of you and speak. Speaking from a mother's perspective, but also speaking from the perspective of being a therapist and an advocate for children. So in my lifetime, I have worked with children and I've always loved people, always. People are fascinating to me, and I think that really, as we come together as a group, we need to discuss how we can solve the problems that we have. They're real. I have friends who are members of the LGBTQ community. I have a family member who is a member. So I understand that these issues are real and that some of these things are very painful to you and to your families. So solutions need to be there, and we need to discuss things. But I'm here from the mother's perspective, but also because in recent months, I've had the opportunity to talk with lots of different people in my community about their feelings on this particular issue as it came before our school board in Prince William County. And this is a nonpartisan issue. People who vote for Democrats, people who vote for Republicans, people who vote for people on down the party lines have concerns that they want to have addressed. Keeping in mind that there are lots of people in this issue, I want to kind of give you an idea of some of the individuals that I've worked with. I have worked with victims of sexual abuse. I have worked with victims of sexual assault. And as has been mentioned before, walking into either a hostile or a non-hostile environment, a real danger or a perceived danger, they can be triggered. In allowing people to use the restroom with their gender identity, it adds a different problem. And what I would hope is that we would have the option of more family bathrooms for individuals to use. As a mother, I have 4 children. I have 3 daughters and a son. And when I go out to public places with my son, there is no way I want to send him into the men's restroom. I've seen too much. I don't want to send my son in there. So having a family bathroom helps me. Recently, I was in an environment where a mother came to me and said, how do you manage somebody like me? I have an autistic son. I can't take him in to the restroom any longer. He's getting too old. A family bathroom answers that question for her. Individuals who are disabled and have to have a caretaker to help them, the family bathroom gives them the option. I would like to see more of those family bathrooms around. In discussing this issue with some of my friends, who come from different minority groups. Their viewpoints are all over the map. But the one thing they have in common is that we can look at other options. We can work together to make this happen. But we do not need to do it at the expense of our children and those who have experienced sexual trauma of any sort. Those of you who've worked in the mental health field know that 1 in 4 women have experienced sexual assault in their lifetime. You need to keep this in mind when you're making these decisions. People on both sides of the party lines need to understand this is a real issue. And I hope I'm adding voice to the many people that I have spoke to over the last couple of months so that you can understand this isn't just about you. This is about lots of different people, and we need to work together. We cannot continue this divisiveness, labeling that is so destructive. Recently, I wrote an op-ed on my opinion on what's going on in Prince William County schools. Do you know that my local newspaper would not print that op-ed because they felt it would be offensive to the LGBTQ community? When we shut down discussions, we do not succeed. The one unique thing that I can bring to you is that I am 46 years old. When I went to East Germany and East Berlin as a child, I will never forget the feelings I had there. You were not able to express your feelings. You were not able to express your religion. We cannot turn into that in this country. We need to discuss this civilly, kindly, and come up with solutions. I hope this gives you something to think about as you are making these decisions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Terry Beetling, and for identity purposes only, I'm president of HOSEA Initiative, that's HOSEA. I'm here to talk really, again, from the perspective of being a woman and a mother. Not because I have a PhD behind my name, not because I'm approaching it from a legal perspective, but simply, and most importantly, as a woman and as a mother. And I thought through this and thought through it, and I thought, why not revisit a piece of history that affects everybody in this room today? And it's how women were lied to by a very aggressive movement 40-some years ago, 50-some years ago, the late 1960s abortion movement. Women were told that it's just tissue. We were just told everything was watered down. But now what we have is a culture with 60 million dead babies. Now some people are already smirking and shrugging their heads and wondering, what in the world does this have to do? It's because people were not treated fairly. Women were lied to. We now know there's an abortion breast cancer link. Women were lied to. They said it's just tissue, it's no big deal. Now we have a culture with millions of women and men who suffer post-abortion trauma. So what does this have to do with this bathroom issue? And again, I keep hearing the smirking, and if you can listen to the speaker before me, this is about being fair to other people. Aren't we tired of being in such a divisive country where there's so much hatred when we're really called to love one another with truth, to love one another? Then we were sold on no-fault divorce, leaving millions of women and children in poverty because the men left, the husbands left. And then we're enduring this, supposedly, of the attempt on the redefinition of marriage. That's another attack on family. And then lastly, now we have this issue of possibly men and girls' bathrooms. I have homosexual people in my family. I probably have transgender people in my family. As a woman, I'm concerned when I go into the YMCA and I'm having to undress in front of a man who just happens to feel like a man that day. And now he's got the Virginia law behind him. It's not right. It's not fair. It's not, this is nothing about equality. We can, and I ditto the comments before, I'm tired of women and children being used as social engineering experiments for the sake of equality or fairness. And we end up 40, 50 years later with a culture of brokenness. Let's get back to coming up with good solutions for these issues, because truly these issues are real. People deal with this. But let us recognize what the risks are, and let's approach it in a loving, fair way. For also the sake of the women and children. Because always when things get turned upside down, it's the weakest among us. So I call out to Speaker Bill Howard.